Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for checking in again today to another episode of Guitar Talk with Todd. Make sure you like and subscribe to the page so you get notices every time I put something new up. We're going to do a quick lesson today. I'm in my studio. This is where I teach full-time every day. So this is kind of perfect time to do one. I've got a little gap here in between students, so I figured I'd go ahead and do a quick lesson to post online. Today I want to talk about the shuffle rhythm. A lot of you may already know this, some of you may not. This is kind of a beginner to intermediate lesson, so I'm just going to go ahead and post this here. Basically, the shuffle rhythm is kind of known sort of as a blues rhythm too. It's got that shuffle feel to it. It's used primarily in blues, but not by any means exclusively in blues. Obviously rock for sure, country, tons and tons of music, jazz obviously of course too, but the shuffle rhythm is kind of across the board, and it's a really cool thing to know. You can use it in place of a lot of standard chords where you're just kind of strumming and keeping rhythm or whatever to go along, especially if you're playing with multiple people in a band or whatever. So let's kind of break it down here. I'm going to do this in the key of A. There's another way to do this where you can change the keys easier. That's going to be another lesson that I'll have coming up. But for today, this one's going to be exclusively about only in the key of A. I think it's just a little bit easier to grasp. I always show this first to my students when they're first learning this shuffle rhythm. So looking at the three chords here we're going to be using, based off of an A chord, a D chord, and an E chord. Okay, I'm going to post those three chords on here too, just in a graph, chord chart. I'm sure most of you know them. If you don't, though, I'm going to throw a chord chart up of those three. Okay, so let's take a look at those three chords. We have the A, and if we take just the top part of that, where we're playing the root, which is the A, open fifth string, and the fifth, which is an E right here on the second fret of the fourth string, we're going to have just those two notes. So it's like the top part of an A chord. Okay, and then for the D chord, which would be the second chord we're going to play, same thing. We're going to do the top part of the D chord. We have the D, and then just the root D, the open fourth string, and then the A here, which would be the fifth. So we're only going to play that much of it. In this case, we're going to just be strumming the two middle strings. And then for the third chord, or what would be called the 5 chord, I'm going to explain that in a minute, we're doing the same thing. This one's a little bit more difficult to see because we're still doing the top two strings of the chord, and in this case again it's E and B, which would be the fifth of E, but not most people don't play that like this. You're just gonna go ahead and use your first finger like you were with A and D down here. So we're just gonna do the top two strings now, and it's like the top part of an E chord, but again we're using our first finger here at the second fret on the fifth string, which would be B. So, alright, so real quick before we even start this, the reason you'll hear blues or a 3 chord progression, which we're about to do in a shuffle format, but it can be applied across the board, the reason you'll hear it called a 1-4-5, in this case A would be the 1, D would be the 4, and E would be the 5. Real quick, and again this is going to be a future lesson, but all music theory and numbers like that come off of the major scale. So if you take the A major scale right there and you just kind of number those notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then our octave A, octave of what we started with. Okay, so now we numbered those notes. So let's find out what those notes are. 1 is A, 2 is B, 3 is C sharp, 4 is D, 5 is E, 6 would be F sharp, 7 would be G sharp, and then the octave A. We're back to where we started, but an octave higher. So again, let's look at what 1 was. That was A. What was 4? 1, 2, 3, 4 was D. And E. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. E was the 5. So now let's take those numbers, 1, 4, 5, A, D, and E, and just apply them to chord form. That used to confuse me when I first started learning music theory as a kid, because I was like, wait a minute, you're talking about 1, 4, and 5 up here, but now you're down here, and it doesn't matter. We're just using this scale as a reference. Once we know that the 1, the 4, and the 5 are A, D, and E, it's across the board here on the necks. I mean, you could come up here and play an A chord, and a D chord here, and an E chord here, and that's still a 1, 4, 5. It doesn't matter where it's at on the neck once we know what the 1, the 4, and the 5 are. Okay, so that being said, let's go back down here where we're going to do this shuffle pattern today. A is 1, D is 4, E is 5. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we're taking the root and the fifth, as we would call it, out of that chord. I was talking about that earlier, which in this case would be the A and the E. And we're just going to add the sixth, which is F sharp, and we found that out earlier when we went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's that F sharp, so we're just going to add it back here, coming out of the A chord pattern we were playing this way. Okay, so now when you only strum these 2 strings, you're going to go 2 times with the first finger only, and then 2 times with that F sharp on. In this case, we're calling that the 6th. So you're going back to just the 5th, root in the 5th, root in the 6th, and when you get that going back and forth, so again, I'm only hitting 2 strings at a time down here. It's the string that my finger's on, in this case the 4th, and then the open string above it, which would be the 5th. Kind of think of the rhythm. You don't want it even. So you don't want this rhythm to be even. What I mean by that is you don't want it to sound like... Once in a while there is, there are certain things you will use that type of rhythm for, but for this shuffle rhythm, we want it to be like uneven and kind of staggered, or what they would call like long, short, long, short, long, short. So the first one's longer, and then the second one is short. So it's like long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short, as opposed to just even. Okay, so that's the first part, or the 1 chord, which would be A. When we drop down to the 4 chord, the D, again, we're going to do same thing we just did, but just drop down 1 string. So you're on the 2 middle strings, so your fingers are on the 3rd string, and you're playing the open 4th string above it. And again, you're just going to keep this first finger on, and then when you add the 3rd finger, it's going to cancel out that note you're playing with the first finger. So that's better than going... I mean, you will see people do that. You can't even go... But I mean, really just trying to keep that first finger on and adding the 3rd and lifting it off. That's the best way to do it. Same thing with the A that we already did. Okay, now going to that E chord, which again is the 5 chord. We're doing the top 2 strings now. So our fingers are going to be working on the 5th string, and we're going to have the open E above that, and we're only hitting those top 2 strings. Okay, so here's how the whole progression is going to sound. I wanted to, I could go around again and again and again. You can do that 100 times in a row if you want to. Okay, so that's a 12-bar blues. So let's play that through that, see, and count it again, and then you can kind of hear where each measure hits, and it adds up to 12. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then 1. I could like start it over again if I wanted to. Okay, but whenever I show this to students, I don't have them count it that way, especially at first. It's very, very confusing and you can kind of get lost. But that's what 12-bar blues means. Again, most of you probably know that, but this is a beginner intermediate lesson here. So 12-bar blues basically is just saying 12 measures of blues. Bar is a slang term for measure. Of course, the joke is if you learn this, you'll be able to go play in 12 bars. Thank you, I'm here all week. But which is true. But again, this goes a long way. We're going to change keys with it here in an upcoming episode. But for now, the way I'm going to have you count this is every time your third finger comes down counts as 1 time. You're going 2 times with just the first finger on, then 2 times with the third on. So every time that third finger comes down, count it as 1 time. So the way to count that is the first part, what I'm going to call part 1 or the A part, you're going to do that 8 times. So in other words, your third finger is going to come down 8 times. Everything else is 4 times. So let me kind of talk and as I play through this. So we're going to do part 1, the A part, 8 times. So here we go. We're counting every time my third finger comes down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Part 2, 1, 2, the D part, 3, 4, back to the A part, 1, 2, 3, 4, the E part, 1, 2, 3, 4, back to the A part, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you just can repeat it if you want. So in other words, the only part you do 8 times is the very first A part. Everything else you do 4 times, counting, you know, your third finger would come down 4 times. I'm going to put a chart up for you guys on here so you can, you know, pause this, screenshot it, whatever. It's actually something I wrote out. It's something I use in my lessons all the time. It's handwritten by me, so it's the real, we're keeping it real here at Guitar Talk. So it's not, you know, this is something I wrote out. I use this with all of my students when I teach this. So that's basically a 12-bar blues or a shuffle rhythm in the key of A. Very useful because, like I said, if somebody's just playing along with you and they're doing A and then they're switching to D and then they're switching to E and then back to A, there's no reason for you to play that same thing if you're working with another guitar player or even with different instruments. So while that's going, you could be doing something like, I'm just pulling that out here. But you could put that over a lot of different things. So that's 12-bar blues in the key of A. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Once again, I'm going to put that up. You guys can pause it. I'm going to put the chords up so you can see it as well. Print those out if you want to. And as I always like to say, hook up with your local guitar teacher. Support your local guitar teachers. You're always going to get better results as a one-on-one. So use all these YouTube videos as kind of like a supplement, but definitely hook up with your local guitar teachers, support them, and I'm all about that. So find a good one and you'll definitely get way more results faster. If you have any questions or comments, please put them below and I'll get back to you. Make sure you like and subscribe. I'm going to be doing a lot more lessons here as well. And thanks for checking in today. We'll see you guys. Take care.